ladies and gentlemen. You're watching India Tonight with me, Sumita Karir. I'm back with the show that deep dives into the biggest stories of the day. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're focusing on India-US trade deal negotiations. A critical deadline is looming as India and the United States race to finalize an interim trade deal, a mini deal before July 9th. And that's essentially when a 26% US tariff on Indian goods is set to take effect. Negotiations are led by India's Commerce Ministry and US trade officials. Those negotiations have intensified, with both sides extending talks in Washington. However, sensitive issues that include India's resistance to opening its markets for genetically modified crops and dairy and agri sectors that remain the sticking points. In fact, President Trump has hinted at a quote-unquote very big agreement with India, but sources suggest that a limited deal covering select goods may just be the immediate solution. The big question is, will the two nations be able to bridge the differences in time, because tensions are also high over agricultural concessions. India remains firm. It's refusing to open its dairy and genetically modified crop markets, citing the livelihoods of millions of small farmers. The United States, however, is pushing for lower tariffs on products like maize, soya beans, but with India's agri sector a non-negotiable red line. Will Washington soften its stance, and will both sides be able to reach a deal before the July 9th deadline? Let's take some of those questions across to our panelists who are joining us. Joining us on the broadcast live is Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador and representative of India at the WTO. Along with him, also joining us is Santosh Rao, head of research, partner, Manhattan Venture Partners. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on ET. Now, let me come to you, Mr. Dasgupta, first. Now, is an India-US trade deal imminent? That's the big question that's everybody's been thinking about and wondering about, given the fact that we have heard from the White House suggesting that perhaps this deal could be sealed in the next few days. However, from government sources here in India, we're given to understand that there are several challenges that are emerging, especially when it comes to the agri sector in the country.
It's very difficult to say whether a deal would be struck before the 9th July deadline, because trade negotiations have an unfortunate habit of getting finalized only on the early hours of the morning of the deadline. So that is something we will have to wait for. Having said that, there are two things which I would like to point out. One is the statement of the finance minister a few days ago, when she said that there are a few big red lines for India, and these include the dairy sector and the agriculture sector. So that is already, I think, a kind of a pointer that things are not going well in all respects. The second statement that I want to refer to is the one by our foreign minister, external affairs minister in the US. He has said that, we are progressing, but and we will have to wait for a few more days before we can say that deal has been arrived at. But we can't, say with certainty something to this effect. So I think negotiations are carrying on. There are these well-known issues of agriculture, including genetically modified food, dairy, and of course, steel, automobiles, and auto parts. These are some of the sticking points which will have to be sorted out before a full-fledged deal is arrived at. So, as you mentioned, limited scope deal could perhaps be arrived at in the eventuality that the deadline has to be met and a full-fledged deal is not yet ready.
Right, Mr. Dasgupta, you've touched upon some very significant points, and we're going to touch upon some of those points a little later on the show. First things first, on how this, trade deal, this interim trade deal is going to look like if the United States agrees to perhaps not include agriculture, or if they decide to not really budge on the agri sector, then what are the options that India has to have? But let me come to you, Mr. Rao, before we address some of those questions. Is the United States indeed serious about this deal, and what are the impressions that you're getting from these statements which are coming out of the Trump administration? Remember, the Trump administration, and most importantly, President Trump, is prone to big-ticket optics and a lot more noise.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yeah, a number of issues. I think Mr. Dasgupta has made some good points, set the stage rather. July 9th is a long shot. I don't think you're going to get a comprehensive trade deal on July 9th. There are a lot of sticking points. And I think what President Trump is realizing more and more, that blanket tariffs is a blunt instrument. It does not work. There are politics involved, there's a nationalism involved, there's internal politics of every country involved. So you can't just go around and just say that this is what we want and this is what that you will give us. So I think that's where we are. And from one report I read is there'll probably be two baskets. They will probably negotiate the easy ones. If anything, by July 9th, it'll be just the easy one, the non-tariff items that can be settled, and then push out the major sticking points to later on in the year. That's what I read from one administration official. So that's a possibility. So I think that's where we are at this point. President Trump, I think at this point, he said that his trade strategy is going to bring countries to the table, and he will get whatever he wants. It's not happening, and he needs to get something on the table. So just to prove, the administration has already hedged their bets. They said July 9th is a loose deadline. It's not a rigid deadline. They can be extended, and that's what's going to happen. It will be extended. They will talk a lot more. And India has a big constituency to answer to, so they are going to be very particular about what they're given and the optics of what's going on. At this point, they don't want to be looked at as they buckled into Trump's demands. So that's a big hurdle out there that needs to be resolved. I don't know the fine points of the trade deals, where they are stuck exactly, but at a very high level, there are some sticking points that both countries cannot get past by July 9th, looks like.
Absolutely. So you are suggesting that by July 9th, a proper trade deal, an interim trade deal might not just happen, although the US administration is claiming otherwise. Mr. Dasgupta, how significant does this deal with India become for the United States, given that some of the other deals, including the ones with Japan and EU and Vietnam, haven't really materialized? And Donald Trump, increasingly from his comments recently that we've heard, he is losing patience with Japan. So is this hardline strategy by the United States more out of sheer desperation?
It is, I think, part of President Trump's negotiating strategy to show his desperation and to push the other side into thinking that very little time is left, so they better come up with their best offers, and so that these can be, pocketed, and then the US can ask for more. So this is the standard strategy that he has been adopting. But I think around the world, if you look at it, the Chinese have threatened the US that the trade deal that the US is negotiating with other countries should be at the cost of China, which basically means that if the Chinese have been slapped with duties as high as 55%, of course, the details of that have not come out yet. Neither have the details, the finer print of the US-UK details, been made public. So it is something which the Chinese have said, that the US-China trade deal or interim deal, which has been struck, should not be, overtaken by the concessions that the US makes to other countries. In short, the other countries should not benefit at the cost of China vis-a-vis the US. So that is one thing. And as you mentioned, Japan, Vietnam, the European Union, even Canada. Canada has just withdrawn the digital tax yesterday of 3%. So they are about to start negotiating with the US. So if you look at the slate, there aren't too many countries which have already signed a full-fledged deal with the US. The UK has done it with respect to only a few sectors and products. So I think I agree with the other speaker that this 9th July deadline is unlikely to be met. And I don't think there is much elbow room for India to concede ground on the sticky issues, which are GM food, which are corn, cotton, soya, and of course dairy, and some of the non-tariff barriers which the US has been raising their voices against, which they think are very unfair. So these are some of the sticking points.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, those are not just some of the sticking points, but of course, India is maintaining a firm stance because we're given to understand from sources, government sources, that they will protect some of these sectors. And, some of these sectors haven't really been opened up earlier as well, whenever it is that we've negotiated with other countries on FTAs. Mr. Rao, let me ask you, given the sector that you operate in, how are you bracing yourself for July 9th, that deadline? And in case India and the United States are not really able to agree on the agri sector and lowering tariffs on the agri sector, India has been pretty insistent on protecting its agri sector. That what exactly it is that you're bracing so far as this deadline is concerned? You've stated that a trade deal might not be done by July 9th. So what is it that you're factoring in?
Yeah, the sense I'm getting is that the market has already priced this uncertainty. They know that President Trump has a habit of being bombastic, making all these aggressive deadlines, and then backing out in the last minute. So I think that's what you're going to get here. And also, you're going to see a lot more activity after the budget bill passes. He's more focused on the July 4th. He wants to pass that before July 4th. And after that, they want to focus on the trade bills. But you're going to see a lot more activity. But at this point, I think the market is not really making it a big issue. It can be a big issue at some point. So far, US has taken in about $96 billion from tariff revenue through June. On an annualized basis, some say close to 300 billion in tariff revenues come in. So it's material revenue. But at this point, we need to see who's paying for it, what's going on. So those are the issues right now. As the earnings are coming up, earnings reports coming up for second quarter, we'll be watching those reports very carefully to see if the margins have been affecting. Are the customers eating the tariff costs, or are the companies eating the costs? So we need to see what the numbers are. But the expectation is that the earnings expectations are going to be down. They are down. And the overall, it is going to affect the growth rate of the country. So yes, there are a lot at stake, even for US and also for the rest of the world. So you're going to see a lot more negotiations. Let's see where that goes. But at this point, the market is not really focused on the trade aspect as such. The uncertainty and the volatility has been priced in. The markets are very walking around very carefully. So they're not taking any big bets at this point.
Not taking any big bets and not taking that kind of pressure as well. Very valid point that you've made, Mr. Rao, that the markets are factoring in that kind of volatility, but one doesn't really know what happens with Donald Trump. You think of something else, he says something else, and a third thing completely out of the blue really happens. So, Mr. Dasgupta, on July 9th, given the fact that, the company's earnings are also going to be out, and of course there is an anticipation that there will be pressure on the American economy, on corporates as a result of these supply chain disruptions and of course the tariff policy of the United States. Are you anticipating some respite that could be given by the United States on these countries? For example, on India, there is a reciprocal tariff of 26%. So what are you anticipating? Will the 10% baseline tariff continue in case Donald Trump is not very happy with some of the countries that are not offering the United States anything? Or will the US, for instance, provide some respite on sectors like steel or aluminum, for instance?
On steel and aluminum, I think on steel and aluminum, I don't think he's going to relent and reduce the tariffs. But on the other issues, 10% tariffs will continue. And of course, the 26% reciprocal tariffs, it is most likely that President Trump will again extend. But before doing that, he will need to have some kind of a deal or some thing which he can show to his constituents and to the rest of the world, and also go to town about what he has gained from India. So to that extent, I think India will. India has already placed certain things on the table. We understand. So those are the things which he will like to then highlight. One of the things is that Indian oil imports from the US have gone up by 270% in the past few months. So that is a big boost for the oil industry in short. But then the agriculture sector also, it is not one homogeneous thing which India is going to do. For instance, in almonds, apples, and a lot of other products, barring
Right.
cereals and soya and cotton,
Right.
India is prepared to reduce tariffs for the US. So those things will perhaps figure in a statement by the US administration saying that we have opened up the markets, etc., in India, and it's a very big market. But talks are continuing.
Yes.
So, in view of the
Right.
positive gestures made by India, we defer this date. Something to that effect could be coming out, on the 8th of July or 9th of July.
Right.
The other point I wanted to mention is that
Right. So, sir,
India
essentially
has
what you're
also.
yes.
Sorry. Yes. No, I wanted to mention that India has also said that it is prepared to offer zero tariffs for a very large number of products. And for those tariffs to kick in, it will need tariffs also to come down to zero levels for a lot of US imports from India. And that the US is unable to provide at this juncture because it does not have a trade promotion authority given by US Congress. So therein lies the problem that
Yes.
even if things fall into place before the 9th of July, it can't be a full-fledged deal. There will be many ifs, buts, etc., which will be there.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mr. Dasgupta, very valid point that you've made with respect to the Trade Promotion Authority that was formed, but it got dissolved a little later on, and it has the final say and final authority on, what kind of tariffs that need to be cut or what kind of tariffs they need to be passed on. Meanwhile, you made a very important point about the agri sector as well, and in fact, some GTRI research suggests that tariff cuts on US farm goods could undermine India's food security, and that is perhaps the reason why India has been very insistent so far as the agri sector is concerned. Mr. Rao, let me come to you. Would the markets be factoring in at this point of perhaps a possibility of Donald Trump perhaps thinking of an extension of this 90-day relief period that was given to countries? Would there be a scenario to that order?
Absolutely. I have said that before. He's known to be this shock and awe, and then kind of extends the deadline as he goes along. He's a businessman. He's a deal maker. He's a master deal maker at that. So he will continue to do it. And he realizes at the end of the day that India is the fourth largest economy, soon going towards third. So we need to negotiate carefully. It's a huge economy. So it's not a quick one and done and then just move on. So he's going to be very careful. In fact, I heard the Commerce Secretary, one of his interviews, he said India is a very tricky market. It's not an easy way to negotiate with them. So it's going to take a long time. But I think a 90-day extension is totally on the cards if it comes to that. At the end of the day, if they see a light at the end of the tunnel, I think they will do it. But I think India is also being very diplomatic, very polite, and they're negotiating in good faith. So I think Trump will appreciate that at some point. He doesn't need to punish them. He needs a big partner in this region of the world, India's region. So yes, there's a win-win for both if they can negotiate and in a very diplomatic and careful manner, in an honest way. So I believe that the market will factor in an extension. I don't know whether it's going to be 30-day, 90-day, but it'll go on. I think at this point, at a very high level, I always believe that 10% tariff across the board is fine. We can live with that. The whole world can live with that. The economy can live with that. But any this reciprocal tariffs, just very random, just because no real good reason, that's not the best solution. So we will get to some point. Negotiations are happening. I think it'll be beneficial to both because these are huge economies and there's a lot at stake.
Right. So, Mr. Dasgupta, what Mr. Rao is essentially looking at is perhaps an extension of the deadline that 90-day window relief period that he gave to countries. But the bigger question then is, can Donald Trump, or is he in a position to set deadlines given the backlash that he's received from China? I mean, China was, of course, countering him back. Now, Japan is also countering Donald Trump back and, of course, is not very open to opening up its cars and agri-sector. And of course, these countries are now perhaps sort of realizing that a pushback against the United States and its unilateral trade policies is the solution going forward.
Yes, I think that realization has started to dawn on countries quite a few weeks ago, that the US is only trying for unilateral concessions, one-sided concessions, because it does not have the authority, the US administration, to reduce tariffs in return. In a trade deal, a traditional trade deal, there is give and take. So one country offers to reduce its tariffs and non-tariff barriers. Other country also has to reciprocate in areas of the choice of the other partner. That is not happening in the case of the US because the US is hamstrung. It does not have a trade promotion authority, so it can't offer any concessions. So that leaves very little room for the other side to offer unilateral concessions for an indefinite period. So that is why I think even if the trade deal gets signed, let's say in October, the first tranche, as they said, there will be this big proviso that if the US is unable to provide reciprocal concessions, then it will be all going back to square one. Some sort of I think clawback provision will be there for the US vis-a-vis India. So India may concede certain ground, but there will be a clawback provision if the US does not reciprocate by a certain period of time, let's say 6 months after October, or maybe 9 months, then it will all come back to the present levels. So that is something, of course, for conjecture for the future. But at the moment, I don't think there is room for India to concede ground on agriculture, especially genetically modified food, for dairy, for poultry, etc.
Right. But Mr. Dasgupta, India has sort of registered its protest at WTO when it comes to reciprocal tariffs on steel and aluminum are concerned, and a proposal has gone to the WTO. So it's not that that India has accepted willfully all that the United States has offered. But the bigger question, Mr. Rao, now is how much is the United States willing to cut? Because remember, both countries earlier this year agreed upon reaching $500 billion in bilateral trade by 2030, and Indian officials to ET now last week said that that target cannot be reached until both sides decide to reduce duties.
Absolutely. That's a very far-reaching target, a good target to have. The both growing economies. I mean, in fact, India is growing, fastest growing economy in the world. So at this point, so yes, it's reachable, but like I said, these are sticky points. A lot needs to happen before we get there. Like I said earlier, India is negotiating in good faith. We cannot afford, or Indian economy cannot afford higher tariffs. It's a tax on the people, on the economy. So there need to be a negotiated settlement. So I think, and also looking back, US is also slowing down. US needs to get on with this. They need a settlement and move on because it is slowing down the economy. The US economy is expected to come down quite a bit, slow down this year, and tariffs do affect the economic growth of the country. So there is at stake, and President Trump, yes, he has a lot of pro-growth policies in the second half of the year, with cutting down on regulations, cutting taxes, and all that. But that will play later on. And then the Fed chair is agreed to lower, not agreed, but I think will be forced to lower the tax rates because of the economy slowing down. The interest rates, rather. He will lower it down. So I think there are some pro-growth things coming later on, but he needs to get going on the right track, get this volatility, this uncertainty out of the way. So there is a big, there will be a settlement. There will be a negotiated settlement.
Right.
President Trump needs it, and India
Right.
needs it. So you will see this. You will see some good news down the road because both need it. Both the countries need it.
Well, we do hope that there's good news down the line as far as both countries are concerned, given the fact that, there are multiple tariff lines. India, for instance, has over 17,000 lines, and it's not very easy to negotiate them in one go. So, of course, there is an understanding in business circles that this could very well be a protracted engagement that India has with the United States, same for other countries as well. Mr. Dasgupta, now you were talking about agriculture and that being a sticking point apart from steel and auto sectors. Now, help me understand, what is it that could be offered by India in terms of what the US can access, and what all will be protected by India with respect to the agri and dairy sectors?
The first thing is that, let's take up the dairy sector first. Dairy sector, the issue is about the cattle being fed, other cattle products, which is basically, the remnants of pigs and other animals, which are chopped up, and, some extract is taken from that, and then that is fed to the cattle. Now, that is something which India will not allow. Similarly, in the case of corn and soya, the main problem is about genetically modified seeds and the products coming in, which have been raised on the basis of GM seeds. Now, that is something which India has been resisting. And of course, the Europeans have been resisting for right from the beginning. And there have been multiple WTO cases against that between the two sides, and the Europeans have not relented. So that is something which I don't think India will also give in on. Now, having said that, the major products that the US, of course, we leave out a lot of fruits, vegetables, etc., nuts, on which India can give market access to the US, for the simple reason that in many of those products, the production in India is either minuscule or non-existent. And even if it is there, let's say in the case of apples, it has already given certain concessions to Australia, for instance, Chile, for instance. So along those lines, India can give concessions. So, basically, it is about rice, about wheat, about corn, which is maize, about soya, about cotton. These are some of the major crops on which India is not going to concede ground. So that is as far as agriculture is concerned. And mind you, I wanted to just put it in perspective. 2% of the American population is involved in agriculture, whereas in pure agriculture, it is 46%, and in allied activities, another 11% population in India is engaged in the rural areas. The average size of an Indian holding is less than 1.2 hectares. And in the case of the US, though I think there are some smaller farms, but the average size is 46 hectares. The contribution of agriculture in the GDP is 15% in the case of India. It is far less, in single digits, in the case of the US. So it is a question of not only about market access, it is intimately connected with livelihoods, with lack of employment opportunities in the manufacturing sector and in the services sector. And that is why the productivity is also low.
Yes.
And investments, have not flowed to the
Yes.
sector, agriculture sector, as we would wish it to happen. So there are many structural problems.
Right.
I don't
Right.
blame the US for that, but there are issues which are very intimately connected with the political economy. So there is, in
Right.
any trade deal, there will be
Yes.
politics. So it could be difficult for India also to concede on any
Yes.
of these fronts.
Right, Mr. Dasgupta, there is a livelihood issue, there is a political issue. So some concessions could come on, the sector which within the agri sector, which are not important. But however, the core sectors will be protected, and that could be anticipated even as both sides look at closing that deal. But Mr. Rao, how will India be able to balance this out? You balance a trade surplus out, given the fact that it's been the main driver of this policy by the Trump administration. He's been looking to minimize the trade surplus that the United States has with other countries. Could we see agreements perhaps when it comes to buying more oil from the United States or in the space of defense, given the fact that, officials from within the Trump administration have made statements regarding these two particular sectors in the recent past?
Yes, in fact, when the trade negotiations started, I thought it was an easy deal because India had agreed to, the defense and oil and all that. They could easily buy things that they don't have, and US can give them. I thought there was a good deal there. I think that's not the issue, and I think US will definitely appreciate that, and it's a plus for in terms of moving the trade needle forward. But I think, my co-panelist said, that there are other sticky issues that India will not give into. I think that's where the whole sticking point is. They will. I really don't know exactly at what stage they are at what degree of separation is there between the two parties at this point. But on a very principled basis, at a very high level, there are some things where India will not give in, and US wants them to give in. So that needs to be settled, that needs to be agreed upon, maybe increase the oil imports and increase the defense imports,
Right.
things like that. So maybe something can be adjusted at this point, but
Right.
there has to be a way forward for both these countries because they need each other at this point.
Absolutely. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening and sharing your perspectives on what lies ahead, the road ahead as we approach that very crucial deadline of July the 9th. And of course, you're hinting that there could be some relief inside. There could be an extension. Meanwhile, India will continue to protect its core agri sectors while giving concessions on some others. But definitely, this July 9th deadline is not just critical for countries, but also for the United States and how it navigates its trade relationships and how global supply chains will or will not get disrupted further. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for us to slip into a very short break, but lots more coming up on the other side of this short break. Do stay tuned to ET Now.